board. So we sent this out. I'm assuming everyone can see the internet. You'll have to bear with a little bit. I'm going to mute everyone, so please, if you can't speak up and you can't hear you, just send us a chat. Zoom is newer for me. This is only my second time, so hopefully this will be painless. One second. Okay. Well, I'm trying to get this off and try my screen. No, I'm trying to move it. Sorry, I'm just trying to move this. On my end, I have a big black box that it's hard for me to see through, so I'm going to make you smaller. I realize you can't see it for me. There we go. Okay, so all the materials you'll want for this webinar is on, if you go to the opi.mt.gov page and hover over leadership, everything related to school finance that we do is under financing grants, school finance. And this particular webinar, all of our webinars are recorded and we put them under this about school finance. Just seems to be the place that fits, but the documents we'll be looking at that Denise will talk about is under this webinar, 2020 School Finance, MASBO, Local Levy. And our presentation, the bottom one. Actually, I think it's the top one. I'm sorry, there's this box on my screen. I just can't figure out where to put it that it's not in the way. So I will turn the driving over to Denise. Let her get started. Do you want to start on this one?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, everybody. Good morning. This is the first time we've done this. It's the first time for me anyway, so please bear with me. We're going to talk about the resolution, the notice of intent to increase non-voted levies for your 2021 budgets. And the deadline for that is March 31st. I'm assuming we have a lot of people on the line because you're wanting to get this put together and done for your March board meetings. And so with that in mind, we will be covering the minimum requirements of this notice. The resources that you have kind of take an overall look of all of your funds, but we'll try to focus on just the minimum requirements and then maybe explain some of the other uses of the spreadsheet that you have before you. But just know we're gonna focus on the minimum stuff. So here's what we plan to talk about in this webinar. We'll give you some background information on why you're having to do this notice right now, and then we'll look at the tools that you have to complete it. Okay, so background information. Back in the 2017 legislative session, Senate Bill 307 was passed, and it did two things that you see up here on the screen. It created the resolution that you must adopt in the spring of every year for the funds that are supported by levies that are permissive. That means your taxpayers do not have an opportunity to vote whether or not you can levy. So those funds are the tuition fund, adult education, builder reserve, transportation, and bus depreciation. Now, back in 2017, those were the funds that were involved at that time, okay? So that's the first thing, was the legislators felt that in the name of transparency, your taxpayers should have an opportunity to know what your intent was with these funds that are supported by permissive levies, okay? That's why you have that part. The second part of Senate Bill 307 was the creation of a new permissive levy in the Building Reserve Fund. Now, we're not going to go into that particular levy in any great depth today, but that is the other part of Senate Bill 307 that happened in 2017, okay? And that's why the Building Reserve Fund is also on this list of funds that have a permissive levy. Now, 2 years later, we had House Bill 351 that allowed transformational learning, or that incentivizes transformational learning. And here's some, you see on the screen some specifics about that. We're not going to go into transformational learning in depth today either, but because of this legislation, there was a creation of a permissive levy in the Flex Fund. And so now the Flex Fund is also on the list of funds that need to go on this notice. If you went through the application process and you're getting some state aid for transformational learning, you'll want to consider putting the Flex Fund on this notice now if you plan to permissively levy in 2021. Okay, so we're listing that. Here's the statute as it looks today. It's 20-19-116 MCA, the resolution for intent to increase a non-voted levy. That's how I'm going to refer to it here on out. I know that initially everybody called it the Senate Bill 307 resolution, but I think it's probably better to try to move toward this other wording, because that's how you'll see it. Resolution of intent to increase the non-voted levies. So here in the first part, you see all the funds that are involved. Again, the tuition fund, adult education, builder reserve fund, transportation, bus depreciation, and then you see the addition of the flex fund there in that first section. That second section lists all the requirements that need to show on the notice. So that's due March 31st. This next slide kind of summarizes all those notice requirements, so I'm just going to go straight to that. So what we're talking about is a resolution that your trustees adopt by March 31st, and then you have to publish the notice in the paper. So the resolution is what the trustees adopt, and then you follow up with the notice in the paper, all done by March 31st. No later than March 31st. Some school districts have already done this. Okay, so you know you can kind of do it whenever you want, but just know you have to have it done by March 31st. Okay, so what you have to have on the resolution is for all of these funds that you may or may not have, the dollar and mill levy increases as compared to fiscal year 2020. Okay, so we're looking forward to fiscal year 2021 budgets, and we're comparing to the year you're currently in. So the minimum requirements on the resolution and notice are the dollar and mill increases in all those funds. You want to use prior year taxable value in making these calculations, and you have to show the impact on a $100,000 home and a $200,000 home. The important thing to remember at this point in time is that these are estimates. Your books are not closed for June 30th. You don't have exact figures. Focus on that word estimate when you're sitting down, not only to make the calculations, but then when you're turning around and trying to communicate that to your trustees, the taxpayers, anybody who might have questions about things. Okay? All right, this is a list of all of the budgeted funds that a school district might have. And I want to take the opportunity right now to say that these are not my slides. These are from Mike Waterman's face-to-face workshop from a couple of years ago that he allowed me to use for this webinar today. So I just want to give him some acknowledgement for creating these for us. So this is a list of all your budgeted funds and whether or not they have a permissive or voted levy. The ones highlighted in yellow are the ones that we're talking about today for this notice. Okay, this next slide is a template that the Montana School Boards Association created when Senate Bill 307 first came out. This is the suggested format of the resolution and of the notice that you want to put in the paper, sample wording. I created a Word document that I could share with you later if you need it. Also, I'm assuming most of you guys are members of the MTSBA, you can probably go in and log in on their website and go to the Montana Education Law Reporter. Once you get to that page, they have a list of templates. I think it's in the far right-hand column, and I would bet that you could find a template for this there as well. Okay?
Denise, there was a question about if someone posts these notices on social media, does that save them from their newspaper posting?
Ooh, I don't think so. I think it has to go in the paper. Well, you know what? Let's go back. Let's look at the statute. When in doubt, look at the statute. Look at the bottom. Publishing a copy of the resolution in a newspaper that will give notice to the largest number of people in the district as determined by the trustees, and posting a copy of the resolution to the school district's website. Okay, those are the minimum requirements. If you want to put it on your Facebook page, that's fine too, but make sure that these two things are covered. Okay, good question. All right, so here's where we were. Here's all your funds. Here's the template. Notice that you have the estimated change in revenues. Again, the change means looking at fiscal year 2020, the one you're in, as compared to what you think you're going to be levying in these funds for 2021. So the estimated change in revenues, the estimated change in mills, the impact on a home of $100,000 value, and then $200,000 value. Now, if you're doing permissive levy in the building reserve fund, there's an additional requirement for this notice, and that is a description of the projects that you will be using that money for. So there's some examples there for you. Okay? All right. This is just a timeline of when certain things happen. Doesn't necessarily relate to the minimum requirements at this point, but that's kind of a timeline. Okay, so we've gone over why we're doing this resolution and what needs to be in it. At this workshop that Mike did a couple of years ago, he created a spreadsheet, and so we're probably going to cut away to the spreadsheet in a minute so that you know how to fill it out. The intent of the spreadsheet is to help you, number one, help you determine the amount and make the calculations for the notice, for the resolution and the notice, okay? Remember, it's only on a certain list of funds, but if you look at the spreadsheet, it shows all those budgeted funds. So today we're just going to focus on the minimum requirements, but I didn't change the spreadsheet because ultimately I think that it would be a useful tool for you when you sit down this time of the year. It would be good for you to maybe look at all of your funds and what's going to happen in 2021. You're probably doing that anyway, but let's look at what it does. Before we go to the spreadsheet, here are the things that you need to fill it out. You need your taxable values for the last 3 years. Not super essential, but just try to have them. Those are found on the cover page of your budget report, and we'll show you where to find that in just a minute. You need your estimated taxable value for 2021. At this point, you don't know what that's going to be. If you have an idea of what's going to be, great. If not, just use 2020 and move on. You need, for sure, your fiscal year 2020 budget report. And at the very minimum, the first 2 pages. And we'll show you what we're talking about there. And then if you choose to use this spreadsheet for general fund type of analysis, you want to have your budget data sheet in front of you. They're out on the website already for 2021, and good job you guys getting them out a week earlier than your deadlines. That was impressive. All right, so can we cut away from the spreadsheet, and then we'll have this other discussion in just a minute.
Sorry, I gotta change my screen share. So the spreadsheet's going to be under here. Sure.
All right. Okay, so a couple of things to remember about this spreadsheet. The yellow cells are input cells. Anything else has a calculation in it. So if you do plan to unprotect the sheet, which you can, and mess around in there, just remember there are cells with formulas that you may be overriding. So focus on the yellow cells. Start here on this page, and you type in your district's name where it says sample school. Just type over that and put your district's name. Then using your budget reports, put in the taxable value. Okay, we got a question.
There's no increase in the building reserve fund. Is it required to put the description of projects? We've had an increase in the last couple of years, but there may not be an increase. And I believe, yes, you are supposed to still talk about your projects. We just recommend you keep it very broad so that if something else comes up, you're able to cover it. And did we have an application for transformation to levy permissively? Now, Della, you can't, if you received an award for transformational learning, you can levy permissively as long as you include it in this notice. So if your district receives an award for transformational learning, you should know about it. I think the application process for 2021 just ended like at the beginning of March. So Cheryl Allen is the one who will send out those award notifications for 2021. You should see those soon. So if you haven't, let me know and I can get that information for you so you can get it before you have to do this notice. But you would be notified by Cheryl Allen if you have an award, then you could levy if it's noticed.
Right. So moving forward to budgeting in 2021, in order for them to be able to input a permissive levy in the flex fund, it will probably require, only certain districts will be able to do that. And they're going to control that probably.
Yes,
okay.
yes, you will not be able to. Yes, the building reserve is just for the permissive levy section because this only covers with, so if you have a voted levy, that is separate from this. So your voters already authorized you to levy those. Did that answer? Mm-hmm.
All right. So moving back to this spreadsheet, you want to begin on the Start Here tab and key in the taxable values, all right? And then if you go, let's see, all the way to the right here, to this Resolution Detail tab, there's a bunch more yellow cells, all right? So what you want to, and we'll show you where to get this information, but on your budget report for 2020, you want to go to the budget summary page, and this column of numbers comes from column H, and this column of numbers comes from column I. It's the number, or it's the amount of your local levy for that year and the mills. So it's those two far right columns. Now at this point, I recommend that you go key punch in transportation, bus depreciation, tuition, adult ed, and building reserve permissive. If you have any of those, go ahead and key punch those in. Now later, if you want to go put in these other funds so that you have an overall picture, that's fine. But put in these numbers in these yellow cells, all right? And then the magic of this spreadsheet is that it makes calculations and comparisons for you. So as you put numbers in here, see, stuff's going to start filling in. Now, if you scroll down to the very bottom of this spreadsheet, this particular chart is the minimum. Okay, notice it has all, it doesn't have flex fund on here though. It has all the funds with the exception of flex. We'll get that fixed. For your, just the minimum requirements on the resolution, okay? So make sure you really aren't going to get any, you're not going to be able to see how the spreadsheet works until you put these numbers in. And then once you do that, you want to go back to a fund that has that's in red. That's all these permissive levy funds. So here, this one is the tuition fund, and you see more yellow cells. Now these kind of, if you look at the individual fund on the budget report, this kind of follows that format. You know, on your budget report, it shows your adopted expenditure budget and then all the funding sources that are going to support that budget. This spreadsheet starts out with fund balance reappropriated, because remember that's going to be used to fund, if you have fund balance reappropriated, that's going to help fund the next year's budget. You might have other funding sources in here. And then if you put in an adopted budget on this one, it will automatically calculate this permissive fee. So put a number in here, say it's 80,000, a lot, but okay. Then it's going to calculate that.
Also covered, just so you know, as we're growing, so we don't get them all between now and June. There's going to be money next year's research to do.
There's some background noise. I'm just gonna.
Okay. Take your time. Okay. Thanks. Bye.
All right, so if you have a taxable value in here, you got to go back and put these taxable values in, right? So let's just put one in here. Oh, that's way too, not enough. All right. Okay, so let's go to tuition fund. So this automatically calculated, no, I need one for 2021. All right, let's go back now again. Okay, so for example, on the tuition fund, we put in an adopted budget. It automatically calculated the levy. It brought in the taxable value from the Start Here tab, and it calculated the mills for you. Go back over to the Resolution Detail tab, and you'll see how it pre-fills all this stuff in. Okay? Sorry I'm jumping between funds, but kind of get the idea. We're looking at the minimum amount of reporting you'll have to do. See how it records down here as well. Now, if you're just starting out, I've talked to a couple people already who said, we've never done a special education tuition levy. We're thinking about doing it in 2021. For those districts, this is the full increase is going to be what they're levying for the first time in 2021. So keep that in mind. Okay, you're going from 0, which is the year you're in, because you didn't do it, to the full amount that you intend to levy in 2021. Then as you work forward in subsequent years, those increases and maybe could be decreases will happen because you're always comparing to the year prior, okay? I would like to go back out here. Let's give this back to you. Let's see where you get this information, okay?
Where?
So, the budget report itself.
Okay. So I'm going to go. Okay, just checking it's following me. So if you go to the school finance main page, all of our budget reports are under budget. Gregory, I didn't see your comment till just a minute ago. The only levy you can do in your flexibility fund is if you received a transformational learning award. Otherwise, there's a provision out there that if you have, that if the state were given flex money and you could do a certain percentage of it, but that hasn't happened since the 1 year that they did it, 1 or 2 years they did it years ago.
Right, so again, in the flex fund, there is a voted levy, but it's based on a state distribution, and there hasn't been one for several years. So no district has a voted levy in the flex fund right now. Districts can permissively levy in 2020, starting in 2021, in the flex fund, but you have to have gone through the transformational learning application process and been awarded a grant. So you guys should all know who you are, and if you don't, you should contact Cheryl Allen, okay? Otherwise, don't permissively levy, don't plan to permissively levy in the flex fund, okay? All right, so here's the OPI website where you find your budget report. So find your district, it's all in alphabetical order. We're gonna pick on Absaroka here. Here's the cover page of a budget report. Here's where you find those taxable values, okay? That's on the cover page. Fiscal year 2020. Scroll down to the next page. Here's that summary of all the funds for 2020. Here's a listing of all the funds. Here's column H, which shows the local property tax levy for that fund for 2020. Here's the dollar amount, and here's the mill levy amount. And these are the figures you're going to want to go back and key punch in on the spreadsheet on this resolution detail page up at the top in those yellow cells. Do that first. And then go back and fill out these individual tabs for your 2021 budgets. This is where you're kind of estimating what you're going to be pursuing in 2021 for all of these budgets. Think about what your adopted budget's going to be, and think about what your funding sources are going to be. Back to these budget reports. Oh, where did I read them? Here? Okay. Okay, so that's the summary page. You can put in all funds, or you can just put in the ones that are required on the notice. But a couple of things. Let's go down to the transportation fund. Here's the general fund. Here's the transportation fund. All right. So here's, if you've never used one of these budget reports before, here's your adopted expenditure budget way up here, $80,000. We start out with what we're going to spend our money on, and then we talk about what money we're going to have to support that $80,000 budget. Okay. Here's fund balance for appropriated. If you're kind of looking back and doing a 3-year average, you could go back to your budget reports for the past 3 years. The spreadsheet has a place to just kind of do a 3-year average, or if you think it's going to be 0, you can just leave those at 0. Here's all the funds, possible funding sources. Here's your state and county reimbursement, and then here's the district tax levy, okay, and the mills. That's where the numbers on the summary come from. Bus depreciation, there's a couple folks that have asked questions about starting actually a brand new bus depreciation fund. Just a quick review of that. You purchase a bus outside of the bus depreciation fund, and then you, at Mayfair's time, you list those buses, all right, as an asset. You put in the year that it was purchased. So see how this district has recent buses, some older buses. You put in the original cost of the bus, and then the law allows you to levy up to 20%, that's this column, of the original cost. In every year, you can levy up to 20% of the original cost, and over time, you can accumulate up to 150% of the original cost, okay? So when you're estimating your bus depreciation fund, you figure out these calculations on each of your assets, paying attention to where you're at in the amount of your accumulated. Notice on these they've already accumulated as much as they're allowed to. That's why this says NA. Okay, they're not allowed to levy anymore. Then the total of this 20% limit column, it could be 15%. You guys, can play around with that. You just can't go over 20. Then the total of that ends up being your levy for the year. And the way you budget in the bus depreciation fund is you take all those funds that you've accumulated so far, add the current year's levy, and then that ends up becoming this expenditure budget at the top. Okay? And really, it's just a matter of going through and filling out this spreadsheet for all those funds that you're using. Personally, I would put every fund on here, because if you've got a decrease in one and an increase in the other, or no change, I think your taxpayers probably should see all of that together. Okay, so all of those figures end up on this spreadsheet.
And
comments?
yeah, and is there any questions at this point? Some are, I think you can turn yourself off mute if you'd have a question. You can type it in the chat box, just giving a pause for the moment. Okay, well, if anything comes up, you certainly can.
Okay, anybody who's been to a Mike Waterman workshop recognizes these kinds of questions. But I think they're worthy of discussion and consideration as you go through this process. The intent of the resolution and the notice, again, your legislators wanted your taxpayers to know what your intent is to do in the coming year with the levies that they're not allowed to vote on, okay? So it was done in the name of transparency. This first question deals with, well, what is transparency in your district? How much information do you share with your taxpayers? Okay, and what kinds of things do you talk to with your board?
And we do have two questions, Sue. I don't believe we have the 2021 tuition fund budget spreadsheet out there, but let me check on that and get that out there ASAP so that you guys can use that for your calculations. And the other question is using the OPI version of the general fund budgeting spreadsheet with the mill levy calculator. That is still out there in our newest 2021 budgeting worksheet. You again need to enter your taxable value, your LE number, and then it does do more automated calculations for you. I think that there's pros and cons to both spreadsheets. So if anybody has questions or wants to go through the OPI one, do let me know. We can do that.
This second question on here talks about when your constituents read the notice, what message do you want them to hear? Well, you want them to know, A, it's an estimate. I would make sure that you have the word estimate on there somewhere. And the reason, I think, for this discussion point was that initially when Senate Bill 307 came out, districts were concerned that your taxpayers are going to see this resolution and notice in the newspaper and think that's exactly what's going to happen in August when you actually adopted budgets. And so, just know that It's also the reason that a district might want to consider showing the change, the estimated change in dollars and mills for all funds. Okay, so just to kind of let them know that you are looking at things on a broader perspective and with respect to all funds. But if it's the first time for you, if you're just trying to get this notice done, I would stick to the minimum requirements. In the end, we do prefer this notice to err on the high or low side with regard to tax impact. Okay, just think about, you know, maybe trying to make as conservative estimate as you possibly can. Don't just throw numbers in there and, you know, have a huge disparity once things come out at the end. What is your strategy for managing the repercussions? This means the very situation where, you know, somebody in your public looked at the notice and then looked at, you know, what you actually do in August, and they want to know why there's a difference between the two. Have a plan for explaining any discrepancies that may happen between now and next August, okay? Maybe you put on a notice that you were going to spend your building reserve fund permissive levy money on a roof repair, and between the time that you posted the notice in August or even into the year, there became a higher priority purpose for that money. You're welcome to do that. Just be prepared to explain that to someone who may have that question, okay?
And I do see there's a couple of questions. Let me let Denise get through her next piece, and then we'll pause and go through those. So don't think we're forgetting you.
Where do we find the 2021 general base dollar amount? The 2021, you are going to, now we're talking about general fund, you'll have to use the OPI spreadsheet. And so if you're familiar with using the OPI general fund spreadsheet and you fill out the input page, if you've already done that, then you can go to the Gen Fund Budget tab and scroll down, way down to like row 214 or something like that. And Paul has it in red letters.
Can I show it? Yeah, let me pause and I will show you. I just want to make sure you can see where I'm at. Okay. Again, anything relating to the budget is in this budget section. Here's the latest and greatest spreadsheet. Again, we always encourage people to save your own version so it doesn't, you don't lose your information. But I'm just going to pick on this one because I was just looking at this district for a different reason. So when you put in your taxable value, but here, here's your minimum base budget. Is that the number you're looking for?
She's looking for her base levy.
Okay, yeah.
I think. Way down. It's in red. Okay, see that base levy on line 221?
221, that's what you're looking for, your base levy amount, yeah. And that's if you do look at the inputs, you can see where you can, your highest budget without a vote or with a vote. So your base levy shouldn't change, but your overbase might if you are going to notice an overbase, but then you might have to do a vote. So for the building reserve fund, what are the school? Yeah, and that was the other thing I was going to pause for. So good question. Everybody, I think, can see that. So that building reserve has its own tab in here. So here's your district major maintenance aid amount, the small box that we refer to. The maximum, picking on this elementary district is 42,200. We do have state aid money to put towards that. If it's fully funded, it's giving you this number of 21,238. This is based on your local dollar of effort, which has been calculated. It's on your preliminary data sheet as well, but it's already figured in here for you. So, you know, one of the questions Denise asked, you want to err on the side of being conservative. You could say, I'm going to levy the whole amount up to the whole amount and do less, or you can go the other approach, which is I just want to levy what I have to levy to capture as much state aid as I can. We're still not fully funded with our amount. So if every district were to budget the maximum state amount, we'll have to prorate what we can give out, but that's just an FYI. So this district could levy up to 42,200. We do have state money to offset that, so we're encouraging districts to keep that in mind. So this is the maximum amount you could do. Now,
Can you click on the levy amount though? What would they use to levy? 20,961.87?
yes. So if we were fully funded.
That's the number you want if you think the state's going to fully fund it.
Yeah, so, you know, you could put in anywhere from, if you were maximizing your box size, the 20,961 up to 42,200, somewhere in that range. You know, this would be the bottom. And if you wanted to maximize it, you know, the state's going to give you 21,000. You're going to levy 20,000 to get the 21,000. And there was a comment about that OPI has a calculation for you, and the mill calculator tab does have this information in there. You do have to put in your LE number and a taxable value. So I use this LE. I put in a big taxable value. I go over to my mill calculator. And you have to know what budget you need. You have to know what your fund balance reappropriated might be, and if you have any other non-levy revenues. So if I'm this district and I think I need $350,000 in my transportation budget, but I'm not going to have anything non-levy revenue in your transportation fund. If you're adopting your whole budget and you get some state and county payments, maybe I get $100,000 for reimbursement. So I'm going to have 103 mills. Last year, I had something that I can't see because I got so many boxes. Oops. Last year, I had a levy of 209,000. So my change in mills is 1703 estimated. That's if you fill out all this information. So like I said, I know there's pros and cons to each one. You know, the spreadsheet Denise went through has you go through more detail and a historical, which is a good thing, especially if you're newer to look through. This is available to you. Or you could do both if you really want to.
Kevin Patrick had a note on the chat to remind everyone in Region 4 that this topic will be covered at the Region 4 workshop, and that's on April 9th in Butte.
It's a shameless plug. Kevin, I'm joking.
I know.
Okay, so what are the goals? Okay, I'm just making sure I covered everyone. Steve was saying he believes Nicole had said the 2021 tuition spreadsheet won't be available till we get information from the feds, which is true. Could be late March. You still can estimate what you think you need in your tuition fund, and as Denise said, it's an estimate. We actually are looking at, one question was, are we going to have a training on how to start a tuition fund permissive levy? Maybe not on how to start the levy, but how to calculate the levy. We were talking about having that as our next webinar. It's going to probably be after your March 31st when you have to have that permissive levy notice out. So that will be probably our next webinar topic that we will do. I just don't know if it'll make it in time for your notice. So you still want to calculate that. And okay, I think we have one more message. For the mill calculator, Ellie, yes. So if you're going to use this general fund budgeting spreadsheet, the requirements you have to have on in the inputs tab is the LE number, which is up here. If you're this is an elementary district, but if you are a K-12, you put it in here, and your taxable value. So this particular district, I just looked at their taxable value last year. It was right around this amount. If you have a better estimate, certainly use that. But you do need those for this tab to work. And for you to see what your building reserve amount is, you have to have the LE number entered. But it will tell you that information.
But the question asked about putting the LE number on that page, the page of that tab. I think the inputs page is where you put in the LE number. Yeah. You just have to do it once.
Just, yeah, good question. Good.
Which is great.
Yeah, just right on the front.
Can excess reserves be used to fund the overbase levy? Yes. I think that's all I'm going to say. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. There's, yeah. Yes. Up to a point. Yep.
Without going over your highest budget allowed.
Okay. So
I'm not sure where we're at on the slides, but
let me pop back into your. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, so again, we just kind of went over all of this. Remember, the input cells are yellow. Enter your district name, enter the taxable value tabs. As you go through this spreadsheet and if you complete all of it, there's some really cool graphs that it generates. Resolution detail tab, using your 2020 budget report, page 2, which is the summary. Again, it's columns H for the taxes levied and I for the mills levied. Go to the individual budgeted fund tabs. Those are the red tabs. They're colored red. And fill those out. You're projecting your fiscal year 2021 expenditure budget and funding sources. We went over that. You can use the amounts on your 2020 budget report as a guide. You could go in and, just using your 2020 budget report, fill in all those tabs so you can kind of see how it works. You have your budget report there to check your figures, and then go fine tune after that. That's just an idea on getting started. Then when you're done with all of that, go back to the resolution detail tab and scroll down, and the one on the bottom is the one that is the minimum requirements for your resolution. Okay? All right, what did I do? Stuck somewhere.
That's right. There you go.
Okay. Again, here's that chart again of all the budgeted funds and whether you have a permissive levy or not. The ones in yellow are the ones required on the notice. The ones that are outlined in red are levies with a tax impact, and that notice isn't required. Okay. Here's a copy of a budget report and where you would find the taxable valuation on a budget report. So find yours. If you're looking for your taxable value, there it is. Here's a handy sheet on how to calculate mills. Both spreadsheets that you saw make those calculations for you, but if you're kind of wanting, to figure it out yourself, here's a sheet that shows you how to do that with an example using numbers. Here's some ideas on how to estimate ending fund balance reappropriated. You could average it, which is what the spreadsheet does. Here's how it's calculated. Beginning fund balance plus current year receipts minus current year expenditures equals ending fund balance. You take off your allowable reserves, and that's how we arrive at fund balance reappropriated. This comment at the bottom that says recommend estimating low if you estimate high on fund balance reappropriated, what you're doing is going to estimate the actual tax levy to be higher than it would be. So, you know, just be a little careful with fund balance reappropriated. It's all estimates, so just estimate low if you can. Another thing to consider, especially if you think your permissive levies are all going up and you're getting a little nervous about that on this resolution, this is just a reminder that for a lot of districts, and not all districts in the state got the benefit of this, but several districts did, and maybe you want to take a look at your general fund, and if you have a decrease in the base levy because of the increases in the guaranteed tax base aid percentages. Okay, so your levies are likely to decrease in 2021 from the year before because the calculation percentage went up. There's a potential that you will offset any permissive levy increases with this decrease in the general fund. Okay, or it could offset any new levies that require voter approval. So again, the spreadsheet that Mike created, the whole intent with that was to ultimately be able to look at all of your funds and how your levies are going to fluctuate for the next year. Okay. So next steps. Decide what you want to include in the notice, whether it's the minimum requirement or all funds. Develop your notice language. Get your board to approve it, probably at your March meeting, which is probably why a lot of you are on this call right now, because you got March meeting coming up. Then after that, you know, if you have used this spreadsheet to its full potential, refine your numbers use it at the end of the fiscal year. Just not only for putting in, you know, what your actual end of the year numbers are, but maybe at the end of the year you want to recode expenditures from one fund to the other to manipulate your fund balances. Okay, so again, that's what the spreadsheet's meant to do, is to help you moving forward as well. But for purposes of the notice, just do steps one through 3 right now. There's our contact information. And that's all I've got.
And the only other comment I thought about is if any of the districts get an advanced opportunity award for 2021, there is a possible local levy, a permissively levied local levy in the adult education fund. So you do have that option, and make sure when you run your calculations, if you're one of those districts, to include that if you intend to do a local levy. Are there any other questions? Renee, do you have anything that you'd advise districts from a district perspective?
No.
No.
You did a good job.
Well, if there are no questions online, you know, as always, feel free to ask questions later. We will post this on our School Finance, About School Finance webinars page, and get that out there for those who want to watch it again or for new people. And otherwise, I appreciate everyone's attendance and appreciate Denise for coming in and presenting.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.